Hello, 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 and welcome to Slay to Z, a podcast tribute to the entire song catalog of one of the greatest bands of all time, Slayer. So, for this episode 1, the inaugural episode of Slay to Z, as stated in the introduction episode, the premise here is not just running through the catalog, but doing it alphabetically by song title, which will be interesting, I'm sure, along the way, not the least of which is how we're starting. Episode 1 starts with the song 213 off of 1994's Divine Intervention album. It's the 9th track on the album, so it's buried pretty deep. In fact, it's the next to last song. It's a Hanneman and Tom Araya pen song. Of course, Hanneman providing all the music, and he actually does the guitar solo as well, which is not unusual at all. And it's Tom Araya, pen lyrics. What I thought was interesting, kind of doing a little bit more research, obviously I've been reading the liner notes and listening to these albums for decades at this point. I don't think I ever put it together. I always assumed that Tom Araya was, not that he didn't do much in terms of writing, but that he did significantly less. And as I was looking, he provided lyrics for, I think, half the songs on Divine Intervention, which is a pretty significant step up from where I feel like he was like through all the 80s albums. And of course, I guess it counts Seasons in the Abyss, which was 1990. But the song itself, 213, it's not incredibly unique, but I do think that it's kind of unusual for Slayer for the obvious reasons. It does have that really ominous, clean single guitar intro, really kind of setting the stage. And, in kind of typical Slayer fashion, the guitars are, or the guitar, line at the beginning, the clean part, definitely is set up in kind of the same chord shape or general same area as basically all the other clean things that Slayer's done, with the exception, I guess, of South of Heaven. But I mean, it sounds, in my ears, it sounds exactly or extremely similar to the clean part at the beginning of Seasons in the Abyss. It's got a little bit of that clean vibe of like Spill the Blood off of South of Heaven. Yeah, it just kind of has that same vibe. But I mean, it's used to really cool effect, I feel like, in this song. Really ominous, and there's other things going on, which I'll get to here in a second, but just to focus more on the guitars, it's probably, out of the entire album, the entire Divine Intervention recording, I feel like it's probably the best the guitars sound on the entire album. It's the clean part, which is so odd because clean is just not Slayer's forte. It's just not what they're known for. And honestly, as most Slayer fans I think can attest, it's not really what we're that interested in. There's something about the intro to South of Heaven kind of setting the mood, especially at a Slayer show back in the day or whatever the case is. But generally speaking, we're not looking for clean. We're looking for aggro, crazy, wild, fast, super distorted, high gain, just screaming, gnarly, distorted guitars. And we get an eventual build up to that, although the track really never takes off into really wild tempo territory. I'm not sure what the actual BPM is at the highest point in the song, but I mean, it doesn't seem that fast. It seems like it's probably like 150-ish, somewhere in there, as opposed to some of the other songs that are well over 200, many of the other songs. So that in itself, I think, is pretty interesting for the guitars. I think this is where, like, a really shining spot for all of the praise that I could heap on the clean guitar sound in the intro. Divine Intervention was, I think, rightly maligned for the last 30 years because of the sound, the production, the mix, the mastering of the album is just awful. And, even the band themselves have noted that. Kerry King in particular, I think infamously, was extremely critical of it. And I don't know if it was Kerry King or Tom Araya has said in interviews before, like, They're not particularly interested in, remixes or remasters of their back catalog, but if there was ever a time to do it, this is the starting point. This is where they would focus their energy. But the bigger point being, like, they're not wrong. Everything, especially guitars, just sound like shit on this album. They sound awful. So it's baffling that the clean part would sound so open and so, relatively rich and everything. And then the moment that the guitars come in, everything just thins out dramatically when it should go the other direction. It should be huge. It should be massive because you have these multi-tracked, fat, distorted guitars that come in with the heavy drums and everything. But it falls so incredibly flat. It trucks along, and there's some cool, interesting riff stuff going on. Very, very Slayer-ish. One side guitar is kind of holding down some open chords, and the other side is kind of very much doing like a noodly, riffy type of thing. Very, very Slayer. Then a little time change. It drops down to like half time. And that's a cool riff. And, there's something else going on in the background with the bass, which I'll get to in a minute, which is really interesting to me. But then it kind of picks back up for the verses, and that's pretty much the high point in terms of tempo. And it keeps going along. And then we get to the guitar solo, the Hanneman solo. Hanneman solo is, it's pretty standard Slayer fare, although I will say I really, really enjoyed. I think he did a hell of a job kind of really leaning into the mood of the song. Just the overall vibe. It's not great gonzos, balls to the wall, screeching whammy bar dives and everything. There is some of that, but it's kind of restrained a bit more than it typically would be, which is kind of refreshing and certainly helps with the vibe and the mood of a song like this. So yeah, guitars overall are pretty cool. It's just a damn shame that the production was just trash. It really squandered some really cool stuff. So yeah, with that said, I guess we move on to drums. So in terms of the drumming, obviously this is Paul Bostaff's first Slayer album. And let me tell you something. Paul busted his ass on this album. The drumming is crazy energetic. It's very, very creative, very inventive. And, you do an A-B comparison between him and Lombardo, which every Slayer fan has done at some point. And you can instantly tell the difference between the two. But I really challenge anybody to say one is better than the others or the other. I don't think that that's a valid argument. Certainly there's differences, and certainly, we can have our own opinions and predilections towards, what our preference is in terms of the style, but both of them are just monster drummers. And for Paul to come out of nowhere from, previously he had been playing with Forbidden, which is, it's fine, serviceable thrash metal, but he just jumped up to this whole other level. And, as I was reading a bit more about the album itself and the recording process and all of that, I didn't realize that the guys in Slayer, specifically Kerry and Jeff, while they were making this album, they were essentially useless whenever it came to the drum parts, which is really interesting to me because you would figure that they would be, the captains of the ship, and they would really be dictating the terms of like, okay, play it like this, or, here's a general idea, or whatever the case is. And there's an interview clip that I found where Paul was essentially saying, like, he's recording the tracks and he would look over at them after tracking and be like, how's this? Or, was that good? What do you think? And they would just shrug their shoulders and say, okay, whatever. And then move on to the next thing, which is just shocking. I don't know if there was 93 or whenever it was that they recorded this album, I don't know if there was a period of turmoil or conflict or whatever within the band, or maybe in their personal lives that kind of had them slightly distracted. But wow, that's really surprising, especially for the guy's first album. And I imagine it had to be to some degree, I imagine it had to be disheartening. Like, guys, like, let's, like, show me that you're stoked on me being here and you're stoked about what I'm doing. Or if you're not, give me some fucking direction somewhere. So anyways, drumming's really, really good. There's a lot of, as the song seems to call for, there's a lot of very typical Slayer fills, but the fills are slowed down in such a way that it really fits, again, the mood and the vibe of the track. So, I mean, to that end, I think Paul did a incredible job bashing it out. And even going to the very, very intro where it's just the clean guitar and some bass in the background, and he's just doing these cymbal swells and just the touch, the finesse in the cymbal swells, like very, very tasteful, very well executed. Maybe it's one place where the, whoever the mixer was, Andy Wallace or whoever it was, they actually did a pretty good job with the mix. Because if you listen to it with headphones on, you can hear the cymbal swells moving from one side of the kit to the other, and hear that in the mix in the headphones, jumping from right to left and back again. It's really, really cool touch that you probably wouldn't catch unless you're listening to it with headphones on, which I don't think I did with this album. I mean, I've been listening to this album since, whatever I said in the intro, like 95 or something, like a year after it came out. I don't know that I've ever actually sat down and really listened to this album on headphones before. So it's nice to hear a couple of little touches in there, especially as far as the production is concerned, because, again, overall the production was just trash, just awful, almost ruined a really, really good album, and certainly contributed to it being very underrated. Okay, so I think that puts us off at the lyrics, vocals, and maybe we'll throw a little bass in there as well. We'll start with the bass. Like a lot of Slayer stuff and a lot of thrash stuff in general, I guess metal in general, especially earlier metal, bass is not the focal point. It's just not. But what's cool is that whenever there's a really clean, open intro, like there is on 213, it leaves you room, or leaves the band room, leaves them room to kind of, fill in a little bit, kind of paint that sonic canvas a bit more. And they do that with some really subtle bass playing at the beginning with like a nice, it's like a chorus or flanger effect or something on the bass, but very, very, light. Some nice slides along with the root notes on that clean opening, which is really cool, man. It really, again, lends to the atmosphere of what's going on. It's very creepy, very unsettling, very ominous, without being ugly, and without sounding just depraved. But it's definitely a hint of the depravity to come. And then later on, as things pick up, and especially in those half-tempo or halftime parts after the chorus or in the interlude and stuff like that, like the bass kind of surprisingly jumps out of the mix. It's very, very punky sounding. It's very overdriven and a lot of mid-range in it. And it just really pops, which I really enjoy. And again, it kind of gets lost in the nastiness of the mix overall. But whenever you have headphones on, it pops quite a bit more, especially if you have shitty headphones on that don't have much bass response to them, like AirPods or something, and it just, that trebly side and that trebly high mid-range kind of thing, it helps those bass lines really pop through. So that's pretty cool. Nice little touch. Just wish it would have shown up a little bit more readily in a regular casual listen. And then we have lyrics and vocals. So it's probably one of the more well-known songs in terms, or infamous even songs, in terms of lyrical composition and inspiration. 213 is obviously the number of the apartment at Oxford Apartments in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, for one Mr. Jeffrey Dahmer. Everybody knows who Jeffrey Dahmer is. There's no need for explanation there other than saying, he was obviously an awful, awful, awful piece of shit human being, which makes him just perfect pickings for a Slayer song. So in Apartment 213 is where Dahmer committed many of the more gnarly crimes that he committed, including sexual abuse, murder, dismemberment, and cannibalism of at least a dozen men, if I'm not mistaken. I don't have it right in front of me, but it's a lot. He really stacked up some numbers there and did some awful, awful things. So, of course, this fits right in the wheelhouse with Tom Araya's, lyrical interest. He always seems to be writing about like matters of dark psychology, and this is like, this is up there with Dead Skin Mask, and he's singing about Ed Gein. Serial killers, man, and just the nasty, dark nature of them. What's really cool, I think, about the lyrics is how they're very much presented as it's almost like a love song, right? And, granted, you read the lyrics, and of course, it is a love song, although a really twisted, fucked up, depraved love song. But the word choices, the way he crafts the lines, really sell it as a love song, but also the vocal approach really sells it as a love song. There's only, a couple of parts where he kind of devolves into that, kind of stereotypical, especially 90s era Tom Araya kind of scream singing thing. But the rest, when he lowers the intensity a bit, it has like this intimate quality to it, which is really cool to hear. And he really sells it well. It's very, very convincing. I don't know. I love it. I've always loved the lyrics. It's some of my favorite Slayer lyrics of all time. More so whenever this album was still very, very fresh and I was in high school and really just obsessed with it. A quick anecdote here dealing with this album. Whenever I was in high school, probably my freshman year of high school, I was very much like, that typical weird loner asshole metalhead kid. And I remember I had this class where we didn't do shit. We literally did nothing in this class. So I had all this time to sit and just write, and I would sit there and write poems and write lyrics and all the other little emo bullshit things that you expect a kid to do. But one of the things that I really enjoyed doing was I would think of like the most fucked up song lyrics from my favorite bands, especially Slayer. They were the primary ones that fit the bill at that point. And I would write the lyrics out for the songs on like a loose leaf sheet of paper or whatever. And then I would take that sheet of paper, and before I left class, I would just, they had a little basket under the seat, under the chair or whatever at your desk for your books. I would just leave that piece of paper just loose there and then leave in the hopes that some preppy kid or whatever would find, or even better, or like a really highly religious kid or something, would find the piece of paper, pick it up and read it, and just would be flabbergasted and would just, it was just being an edgy 14, 15-year-old, whatever I was. That's all it was. But anyways, I think about that all the time because I can say with 100% certainty that 213 was one of those papers that I left behind for somebody, some poor sap to discover later on and be extremely disturbed by. Or maybe they just took it and balled it up and threw it in the trash. Who knows? I never heard anything about it. Also, another little aside here. Same era, I remember dating a girl, and I don't know if it was that I didn't fully get the lyrics, like the meaning or the implication behind the lyrics at that time, but I remember writing a letter, a love letter or whatever, to whoever this girl was that I was dating at the time. And I remember putting in one of the, like the chorus line from 213. Gosh, I can't remember what it is off the top of my head, but death, love's final embrace, your cool tenderness, memories keep love alive, memories will never die. I remember writing that in the letter and thinking, she's going to love this. This is so fucking romantic. Now, looking back on it, it's so unbearably fucking cringe. It's awful. I think about that every time I listen to this song now, and I listen to the lyrics, and I'm thinking, this poor girl, like she had to put up with that. And the thing is that the girl was a girl that she may not have known that song, but she knew Slayer, certainly. So she may have put two and two together. We didn't last very long. I should definitely caveat that, but it's all good. no big deal. You live and you learn, and you move on from your stupid little emo phase in high school. So that's pretty much the story with 213. In terms of where you would rank it, or where I would rank it in the pantheon of Slayer tracks all time, I would probably put it in the top half, but I don't think I would put it in the top 25% or the top quarter. I think it's a good song. I just don't think it's like this unbelievable, groundbreaking track. I just think it's solid for what it is, and that's about it. So anyways, that's 213. So we'll wrap up on that for this time. Looking ahead to the next episode, looks like the next track or tracks that are up is going to be a cut from the Punk Covers album from 1996, Undisputed Attitude. Track will be the Abolish Government and Superficial Love covers from the band TSOL. So that should be interesting. I definitely have some thoughts on Undisputed Attitude, and it's another album that kind of has been pretty maligned over the years since its release, but I definitely have a soft spot for, both as a Slayer fan and also as to a lesser degree, a punk fan. So definitely looking forward to digging into that a bit more. So as always, thank you for listening. Thanks for jumping on the ride here. Stick around for a while. As always, if you have anything that you want to share, or any insights, I'd love reading anything that you got to let me know a little bit more about your viewpoint, or if you think I fucked up or I'm an idiot because I said it this way or I think this way about it, let me know, man. You can email the show at slaytozpod, that's slaytozpod @gmail.com. Don't forget to rate if you have an opportunity to do so. It's really, really appreciated, and it helps kind of get the word out a bit more. So thanks again for tuning in, and remember, as always,